And welcome into the Four Verticals Podcast, episode 174 for April 16th, excuse me, 2026. High top 8, beautiful Jacksonville, Florida, as per usual. Bit of a interesting situation with me in particular with the show. And of course, we didn't have a typical Tuesday show. Apologies for that if you've been following last week's show on Thursday. I let you guys know that there was a strong possibility we couldn't do a show Tuesday for various reasons. One of them being that my apartment here. Long story short, we have these yearly emergency system drills and whatnot, so I have to come around and go to all the apartments and do the test all the emergency alerts and whatnot, alert systems here across the apartment. So Tuesday having a show would not just worked. So is what it is. But we are live here, of course, on YouTube as per usual. And we are on Spotify as well. So if you're new here, welcome to the show. We talk college football all year round. Got a couple things to talk about today, and then we'll be a bit of a shorter show because of the later start time. By the way, off the top of my head here, we'll be having an extra pod tomorrow because, as you know, albeit it's not related to college football, but of course, what we cover on this show is we cover college football. We cover of course, Marvel and Star Wars and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Most of that's for the extra pod. But since today is CinemaCon, for those in the movie industry, they should be debuting, at least Disney. They will have their presentation there at CinemaCon over in Las Vegas. And the Marvel portion of it will be around like 5:30, I believe. So the expectation is, what I'm trying to say, is that we should be getting some information and maybe even some advertisement stuff for Avengers Doomsday, okay? Just put it out there. Very high possibility. So we'll do an extra pod tomorrow, reacting to whatever news comes out. And, of course, along with other questions they may have submitted to me over the past few weeks. We'll talk about some other stuff as well. But, yeah, just put it out there. We should be doing an extra pod tomorrow, I think, around this time in the afternoon. I think it's 2:36 right now on the East Coast, around that time tomorrow. Just letting you guys know, maybe a little bit earlier, but around this time tomorrow, we should be doing an extra pod for you guys, recorded on Spotify only, by the way. So again, make sure to follow us or subscribe to the podcast feed and on YouTube, of course. Follow us on the socials, Instagram, X, Twitter, not at the moment. Working on that bit of an issue there. It's popped up last week. If you noticed, yeah, it's an issue over there, but don't worry, we're working it out. We'll get that figured out here pretty soon. But at the moment, not Twitter, X. But we are on Instagram, so maybe may have to get more active on there, I guess, somehow. But anyway, we'll work out the Instagram, the Twitter issue, X issue, but everything else should be. We're not, having any issues elsewhere. So let's get into the show here. Again, shorter show today, unfortunately, due to some timing issues. But we'll have a full recap, I guess, if you will, a whole full recap of spring practice and whatnot the following week. Then I believe we should be getting close here pretty soon to doing our schedule predictions. Yeah, that's in 2 weeks, right? Yeah, 2 weeks. How about that? Crazy, right? First, so that'll be the first show will be on the 7th of May, and we'll do our predictions. Start those up. Anyway, let's get into the show here. So, who is going to be the best quarterback in the BIG12 next season? Who is it? Who is it going to be? So I have a couple of names on here. Actually, I forgot one name, actually, so let me add that in real quick. I totally forgot to add this in. But as most of you probably know, we've been doing this segment for the past couple of shows where we just kind of go over who are going to be the best quarterbacks in each conference, right? Probably a new segment we'll be doing every single year, probably on this time. Just who is it going to be? Who is going to be the best quarterback in the in most of the Power 4 conferences? Probably won't do the G5, but maybe we will. Like my microphone on my shirt here. I've been holding it. There we go. Let me see here. Add in this name real quick, and we should be good to go. Forgot one, but totally forgot to have this one, and got through forget about this guy. Okay. So again, this is not an exhaustive list, but just certain names that just to pay attention to. Who could be the best quarterback? Of course, we've had major turnover in the conference already. I mean, we've had so many guys in the Big 12 that are no longer here, whether through transfers or just graduating. So new names replacing some pretty important, or the most important position on the field. First up here, Brandon Sorsby leaving Cincinnati to Texas Tech. He could be up there for sure. A very good veteran quarterback. He was at Indiana before. He has been at Cincinnati the past couple of years. Sorsby has. Now he's at Texas Tech. I think he's an upgrade over Brandon Morton, who they just had. He's moved on. Maybe, probably. But he's certainly up there. He would at least would be probably my number one overall pick. But you can talk amongst yourselves in the comments section on YouTube. So Brandon Sorsby is up there as well. Well, not up there as well. I don't know what I was just saying there, but should be up there for the best quarterback in the Big 12. Behind him, or well, it's not really an actual countdown, but just after him, we have Julian Lewis, quarterback at Colorado, former 5-star guy, played a little bit last year, and he should be the starter, I believe. I don't know why I just said believe twice, but but yeah, I am assuming he will be the starter, Julian Lewis. I mean, again, former 5-star guy. He's not really a dual threat guy, but he's more like a backfield creator, so he can run around a little bit. He's more of a throwing traditional pocket passer type quarterback, even though he's not really a traditional pocket passer. We haven't really seen him play a whole lot. I mean, he played a little bit last year at Colorado, very small sample size. This would be, if he is the starter, the first time in his college career that he'll be the full-time starter. So a lot of mystery there. Could he be good for Colorado? Yes, I know they were really bad last year, and this year it's not looking too good. And yes, I've seen all the memes and stuff about, oh man, Colorado, they look really small. Not really physical. They're pretty small. Yeah, that's a bit of a concern for sure. Look, we'll dive into that more once we get into like schedule predictions and things like that, and actual breakdowns of the teams. But Julian Lewis, I mean, him being like if we were to have Brennan Sorsby number one, I don't know if I would have Julian Lewis be behind him. Probably not. But based on his potential, right? The potential that he has, whether it's his physical abilities or potentially other abilities he has, leadership wise, that you could bring to the table, unlike what you had last year, whether it was because of just being not very decisive at the quarterback position last year. I would imagine that couldn't get much worse, and Julian Lewis could potentially provide that. Of course, he is another year wiser. He's been in the system long enough to learn it a little bit more over there with Deion Sanders and company. So Julian Lewis could be somewhere in the neighborhood, but not really like behind Brandon Sorsby, who I personally would be my number one. After him, would probably solid in the top five, probably Bear Bachmeier at BYU. Brigham Young. Not the most talented kid in the world, but he's efficient. He's pretty good. Of course, he's comes from a long lineage of quarterbacks. Of course, his brother Hank played at Boise State under Brian Harsin. I believe did he go to Tulane or something like that? I don't remember what happened to him, but yeah, Bear Bachmeier, he's back this year. Kalani Sasaki is back this year. Their schedule, as we have mentioned previously, I guess we mentioned it a little bit previously. I mean, look, they get Notre Dame later in the year, if I recall. Yeah, around mid-September, I believe, if we go to their schedule real quick. But he'll have opportunities to show why he is definitely one of the better quarterbacks in the Big 12 and a quarterback in a Big 12 that again is going through a lot of turnover, right? So his name should definitely be up there. Bear Bachmeier for sure should be up in that upper echelon of quarterbacks for the Big 12. And here's our first newcomer, first pure newcomer, transfer. Drew Mestemaker, quarterback, came from North Texas with his head coach, Drew, I believe, is it Eric Morris? Well, Drew Morris is the YouTuber for college football video games. Wrong Morris there. It's Eric Morris. Yeah, not the other guy. He's not the expert on YouTube. But yeah, so Eric Morris, he comes in, he brings all this, roster, including his quarterback, Mestemaker. So he should be there. He understands the system. It's literally the same system. So sort of like Byron Brown going from UCF to Auburn. It should be a seamless transition. So that he should be up there just because of experience and obviously a major upgrade from what you just had previously under the final couple of years of the Mike Gundy situation. Let me see. I forgot to add another name. Yeah, I think I forgot to add someone else on here too. I totally forgot. Okay, and I added him in. The person who added in was DJ Lagway at Baylor, right? He replaces Sawyer Robinson. He's off to, I guess, the NFL, I would assume. DJ Lagway, probably going to be your starter there, I would imagine. If he hasn't been announced already, I haven't seen as much lately throughout. But I would imagine he should be your starter day one versus Auburn in Atlanta, right? Lagway, kind of like Julian Lewis a little bit, but Lagway's played a lot more than Julian Lewis. Just to, he's a 5-star guy. Struggles and sort of a kind of an up and down. It's like that graph. I'm sure most of you have seen. It's the we're so back, it's so over. We're back, it's over. We're back again. That's DJ Lagway's career in college, right? It started off as we're so back, then it's over, then we're really back, then it's really over. DJ Lagway's in the it's really over category, or at least the part of the cycle, right, of the chart. And he's at Baylor now with Dave Aranda, kind of both in the same situation, ironically. And I grant you DJ Lagway's not a head coach, but both on thin ice. Dave Aranda is on the hot seat. Well, I mean, let's kind of call it what it is. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of having that discussion, it's, part of reality in college football. It could be a potential that both of these guys are just bait for each other, right? That both of these guys are just down on their luck. Things are not going too well. Player, head coach. The perfect combination, sort of a rallying point, right? Sort of a rally around the flag, the Baylor flag. Everyone's against you. It's not impossible that sort of like Julian Lewis, you get a upgrade in terms of, and look, it's a little bit different because one team had Sawyer Robinson, one did not. But Sawyer Robinson, given who he was as a quarterback, fairly efficient, didn't have the best athletic ability. DJ Lagway does have that. He is a dual threat type quarterback, and I think this would be an upgrade in terms of the physical department. Now, in terms of skills and the known potential, yeah, probably a bit of a downgrade, but who knows? He could easily shoot up. Probably not, in the neighborhood of like Brandon Sorsby or Bear Bachmeyer, or even Drew Messemaker, but definitely would be a little bit higher than Julian Lewis, at least in my opinion. Next up here, Avery Johnson. Remember him? Kansas State. I was talking about him this time last year. I was like, bro, this guy's going to be like, I was a trophy winner. I didn't say that necessarily, but I was definitely very much so excited about him, right? And then last year happened. It was what it was. Got off to a bad start, and the season was what the season was, right? I believe that they do. I know they qualified for a bowl game. I don't think they went to one because of the coaching change with Chris Kleiman retiring. Whatever happened there, and then you bring in Colin Klein back, former quarterback at Kansas State, was a Heisman candidate in 2012. So you have Colin Klein, who he is familiar with Avery Johnson to a certain extent. Avery fits his offense, right? Sort of like what you saw, kind of what happened with Marcel Reed, right? The past couple of years, right? Marcel, dual threat guy. His ability is his legs. So kind of like with Marcel Reed or Avery Johnson, obviously it's a lot bigger than him. Maybe has better arm than Avery, or a better arm than Marcel Reed. So there is some, I guess I don't know if I would call it like physical. Well, I guess it is sort of physical upgrades, but Avery's a different style of player. He's more of a physical runner, where Marcel Reed is more of like, run around, sort of like in that category with like Kyler Murray, Nick Marshall. I guess, yeah, Baker Mayfield a little bit. So Avery's definitely more on that like Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, Nick Fitzgerald, if you remember him from Mississippi State back in the day. That's kind of his style of quarterback, right? More of a power running quarterback. And, whether it's like 4th and 1, 3rd and 1, 2nd and inches, like just run him over the top and he'll get the first down for you, right? So if that combination with him and Colin Klein, that style of offense, I would expect Avery Johnson to, not necessarily like be a whole lot better, because I think what we have seen of Avery Johnson is who he is, right? He's a good dual threat quarterback, doesn't have the best arm, but if you're running an offense that tailors towards him, his legs, then he should be efficient, right? Kind of the same thing we people have said about coaches like Dan Mullen, right? Dan Mullen needs a very, very specific quarterback to run his offense. You can't really have a pocket passer and run that style of offense. You can try and do that, but we've seen that fail more than it's succeeded. That's sort of the same thing of Colin Klein. He needs to have that element of running quarterback. That's who he is. And that's the Colin Klein doctrine, if you will. If you want to go down that road, that sort of offensive doctrine, right? And Avery Johnson fits that doctrine. He's a dual threat quarterback. He's more of a power runner, and he doesn't have like the best arm. He has a decent arm, so he can be up there as well. Avery Johnson. He's probably, I think, out of all these guys, most experienced behind Sorsby, I believe. So that also can be said. And then this next one may surprise you a little bit, but if you've been following recruiting and listening to all these shows like Josh Payton, Cover 3, this shouldn't surprise you. It's Keyshawn Henderson, freshman quarterback at Houston, right? I think, well, it's not just me that thinks, that's everyone else just knocked over my headphones or bumped into them. with Keyshawn Henderson, well, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so with Keyshawn, I know yes, he's a true freshman. He hasn't played yet, but the expectation is now. I believe this Carter Wegman's still there at at Houston. I think he is, but I don't think he's. The feeling is that he won't be starting. I'd imagine. Let me see. Yeah, he's still there. So yes, even does. I mean, you can put either of these guys on there, whether it's Wegman or I guess the freshman Henderson. But the expectation, whether again you're listening to Josh Pate or people who follow recruiting like Bud Elliott over on 247 Cover 3. The expectation is, even though yes, Connor Wegman's back and he has improved slightly over the past couple of years, the expectation is that Keyshawn Henderson should be the starter at Houston. Even with Connor Wegman back, it's like, look, dude, you've been serviceable for us. You did well last year to a certain extent, but Keyshawn Henderson is the goal. He is sort of the new shiny toy. You have to start him. I mean, there's a reason why you're paying him all this money to come there, right? He's not sitting there to ride the fucking bench. You can say the same thing about it's sort of like the Bryce Underwood. It's sort of like the Bryce Underwood, dilemma last year, right? You could have very easily not started him, but you don't want a 50,000 or a 50,000. He's worth more than that in terms of money he's getting paid. You don't want a $1 million worth $1 million worth quarterback riding the freaking bench. Like, you're just not. That's not the way college ball is played now. So the expectation again is that even though yes, Connor Wegman is back again, Keyshawn Henderson will be your starter for Willie Fritz in Houston. That's just my opinion. Other folks agree with me on that. I don't think it's been confirmed, but I would not be surprised if you get through fall camp in a few months. Say, hey, Keyshawn is looking like to be the starter going into it. And once we end it, he wins the starting job. No, a lot of folks be shocked by that, given that Connor Wegman's still there. But again, and one of these five-star guys, sort of like Bryce Underwood last year, where you cannot let them just sit the bench. You have to play them. That's the reason why you recruited them to play. You recruit them just to sit the bench and play school. They're to play football. So Keyshawn, I am expecting him to be the starter. And I do believe if he is the starter, he could be in the running for the best quarterback in the Big-12. I mean, he's a dual threat guy. He probably, I guess he's a little bit bigger than Kyler, but in terms of what's been described of him and some of his film I've watched, it's been a little bit. But from what I remember, he's a dual threat guy, kind of like Kyler Murray, sort of like, maybe like a better version of Arcel Reed. That's who he is. And I think, given Connor Wegman's limitations and what the sky's limit is on Keyshawn Henderson, he should be your starter for Houston. No doubt in my mind, he should be your starter for Houston. And I think he probably will be. So that's why he is up there. Yes, he's a true freshman. Yes, he is unproven. But the potential of Henderson being a bigger return on investment is a lot larger, or at least the possibility is a lot bigger than trotting out Connor Wegman again and going game 4. And I think with Keyshawn Henderson, the expectation for Houston, given on top how friendly their schedule is, they will be a challenger in the Big 12 this year. No doubt in my mind, they will be a challenger in the Big 12, especially with him at quarterback. Houston should be a major player for that league, and I think they should be. He's the starter. So there you have it, best quarterbacks in the Big 12. If I had to choose one right now, probably Brennan Scorsese, but I'll be honest with you, Drew Mestemaker will be up there as well. And of course, you have DJ Lagway, Avery Johnson, Keyshawn. But with Brennan Scorsese and Drew, it's like 1A, 1B for me. I'll probably choose Scorsese just based on experience, but a sneaky one, Avery Johnson. He's still around. People forget he's there. And again, that combination with his skills and abilities and with Colin Klein's offensive doctrine, I think Avery Johnson could have a nice bounce back along with Kansas State in general. So, but again, keep an eye on Keyshawn Henderson too. He should be a fun player to watch. Yes, you're gonna have your ups and downs because it's a freshman quarterback, right? But I am expecting him to be their starter, and if he is, and I think Houston will be a contender this year. So that is just my opinion. Let me cool my microphone here. I'm trying some different stuff here with the microphone. If it sounds better with it close to my mouth or like clipped onto my shirt here, the white shirt. But let me clip back on. Instead of just holding all the time. But you guys know in the comments if that works out or not on the stream, and of course on Spotify as well. Get some more water real quick. It's really weird when you're away for a full week of not doing podcasting, which is so weird as I'm used to doing it in the afternoon again. Or this week when I've worked, you sort of get, I'm going to say groggy, but yeah, I guess kind of a grogginess because you haven't done this in a while. But much like riding a bike or like doing anything really, you get back into it pretty quickly. So that's so if you're wondering why there's moments around pausing or having to like in the last segment adding in names I forgot to add in, that's why. Next up here, bit of a I don't know, I guess like under the radar type situation, but college football playoff had some news come out. That's nothing to do with expansion or the format changing, anything like that. It's new branding. They've rebranded themselves. Now it's still the college football playoff, but they, based on, again, this is from reporting from guys like Brandon Marcello and whatnot. See if I can pull up a photo here. Yeah, this is about 2 days ago. Yeah, so they have a new branding and identity. And look, they're still called the college football playoff, so it's not like the whole, like they're not called that anymore. But going forward, instead of having, like, for example, on the fields, like when you watch a playoff game, instead of having the college football playoff, they just shorten it to the acronym CFP, which, CFP college football playoff, he really gives a shit. Apologize for cussing there, but like seriously, he really cares. I mean, yes, it makes it easier to, I guess, from like a field aesthetic. Yes, it's easier to put CFP instead of college football playoff on the field. I'm sure the grounds crew people are very happy about that. But the logo system and identity, it's not really changed that much. It's just you're changing the lettering, and that's all you're doing. I mean, you can listen to all the stuff like Rich Clark put out a statement saying, "Oh, it's since its inception, the CFP has represented the pinnacle of college football, capturing the excellence in pageantry and unwavering fan passion to make our sport unique." And then he continues with like our refresh logo system builds on the success of the past 12 years and positions our brand for continued growth. All that sounds good. All that seems pretty, typical cookie cutter PR stuff, which I've been a part of to an extent. All this, to me, in my opinion, was, at least in my opinion, this is nothing based on any reporting one, not just my theory, is that this was probably at the behest of grounds crew people and stadium workers. That they probably hated the fact that every single freaking time they had to put the logos and stuff on, they had to put the entire college football playoff wording on the field. This to me was probably, again, at the behest of these grounds crew people and the stadium workers that, hey, could we just shorten it to the CFP? Like the BCS didn't have the Bowl Championship Series logo on the field. They didn't have it. Was just the BCS and the crystal football, right? So again, if you're a grounds crew people or a grounds crew worker or a stadium worker, this is like golf clap, thank you. But as a fan, no real change, and for those of us who play the college football video game, obviously this will be a change aesthetically, but in general, I mean, like, who cares? Like, the CFP was already being used officially. This is just them changing it from a on-field aesthetic. This is how it'll look. And I'm pretty sure this was at the behoost of the grounds crew people, the stadium workers who were probably getting annoyed with putting college football playoff on the field every single time. Now they get shortened to the CFP. Makes their job easier, makes them happy. So again, you can read all this stuff about why they did it. Let's not beat around the bush. It was, workers complaining about it, and I think this is long overdue. Now, does this change the system? Does it change the way, they're probably going to keep on expanding the playoff? No, it won't. But from a branding standpoint, from just a simplicity standpoint, I think we can all agree this was needed, and there was no reason to have college football playoff on the freaking field. The BCS didn't have that problem. The SEC championship game doesn't put Southeastern Conference in the middle of the field. I think we can live with, or at least I think we can be fine with having CFP being on the field versus college football playoff. I think a lot of the grounds crew folks and the stadium workers are thrilled, and I think this was at their request for this to change. So again, a lot of folks just thought, oh, that just happened randomly. No, I'm sure that they've been getting complaints over the years about, hey, can we just shorten this to CFP on the field instead of us ground crew workers spelling out the whole thing. it was long overdue, but make no mistake, this was the grounds crew folks and everyone who works all these stadiums where the games are hosted at. They've been complaining for this, I'm sure, for a very long time, and I think they finally got their wish, which is probably long overdue. But again, does this change the system overall? Does it like change the playoff format? Not necessarily. It keeps it like mostly the same. It doesn't like change it at all. So new CFP branding. I mean, look, it's pretty simple. Fine with me. Granted, it's no BCS. It's no. I mean, it's not the aura of that necessarily, if you want to use today's terms, but it's a step in the right direction in terms of making things easier for the grounds crew folks. And again, people who a lot of college football fans forget exist. I mean, you go to all these games, whether it's college football and the NFL, it's a production, right? It's a production. You get make sure every single thing and every single, whether it's the food stands or the way the field looks and lighting and the seating organization, all that stuff is a huge army of people. It's the cogs and within the bigger machine. And I just feel like a lot of folks probably don't realize that, again, spelling out college football playoff and all these fields every single year, it's very, repetitive, and it's very, very long. So I'm assuming this is why they did it. Make no mistake about it. That's why they changed it. It wasn't some like, oh, we, randomly today on April 14th decided to shorten the college football playoff branding to just CFP. No, this was something I'm pretty sure has been complained about for a long time from stadium workers and grounds crew people who have to literally go and paint on those logos on the field. I'm sure they've been complaining about for a long time. They get their justice. Now their work can be cut down even shorter. I can just put the college football playoff trophy logo and the word and the letters CFP instead of just spelling out college football playoff. So they're happy. We're happy. Everyone's happy. We can clap. But I want to get my thoughts on that because I know some people were talking about it. Like, even had Tom Fornelli teasing it out. Almost as he has inside sources. I mean, he's a journalist, so of course he was well aware of what was happening before then. But anyway, moving right along. Some more water here. Again, if you are new to the show, whether on Spotify or YouTube, welcome in. Again, we do college football all year round. That's our big topic here is college football. Of course, we talk about Marvel news, Star Wars news, Tampa Bay Buccaneers stuff. That's kind of our show. Now, granted, the other stuff outside of college football we talk about on the Extra Pod, it's on Spotify, so make sure to be subscribed over there and follow us on the podcast feed. But YouTube is sort of our bread and butter. This is where it's not where we really began. We kind of began on Spotify originally, but now we do both now. So it's been a massive asset for us. We're not the best college football show, but definitely the newest. I mean, this will be our second or third year now existing, which is kind of crazy to think about. Or close to our third year. I believe it's only our second year. All right, college football, historical what-ifs, and we'll get out of here. Again, shorter show. Apologies for that, but because of timing, we're having to make this cutting this short just a little bit. Historical what-ifs. We've been doing this for a while. I think we're going to start wrapping this up once we get closer to like the schedule breakdowns and the projections and whatnot. But we'll keep on doing this for as long as we can. Of course, we'll bring in spicy predictions pretty soon. So, historical what-ifs. Again, these are just, could be anything. Could be on the field, what-ifs, off the field, whatever. First up here. What if speaking of CFP, ironically brought up the new branding to now this, what if the college football playoff didn't exist? What would happen, right? What if, I don't know, I guess the BCS system stuck around. So, yeah, what would college football look like? This was the case. Well, I would guarantee you that more than likely, you wouldn't have Ohio State last year win the national title. You wouldn't have had a lot of these teams win the national title. You would have had still, if it was the BCS, I would imagine, 1 versus 2 every single year. So if we go, I guess, to, I don't know, any random year, besides 2020, let's do 2017. There we go, 2017 college football rankings. Let's go to, I guess we can use the AP poll here for the final week of the season, or at least the championship week, right? Not the final one. So, according to the AP poll in 2017 as an example, if they were using the BCS system, if these rankings were the BCS, it would have been Clemson versus Oklahoma in the national championship game. So, you would have not had Georgia or Alabama play in the national title. It would have been Oklahoma, Georgia. So, basically, every single national champion from 2014 to now would have more than likely been completely different. Now, I think there would have been some years where you would have gotten the same result anyway. So, like, for example, 2019 LSU, yes, one of them been like, it would have been them. Obviously, they were number one team in the country, so that wouldn't change. But I believe Ohio State would have been the national title opponent versus Clemson. Last year, I guess it would have been Indiana versus, I guess, Ohio State, if I'm not mistaken. We'll check here. I know it's only been like several months, but I'm pretty sure, yeah, it would have been Indiana, I guess, Indiana versus Ohio State still. Let me check. I know that was the case. No, Ohio State versus, or Indiana versus Georgia. Excuse me, not Indiana versus Ohio State. Indiana versus Georgia won the national title last year, not Ohio State. Again, much like 2019 LSU, you still wouldn't have had Indiana be the number one overall team going into the national title, but the number two team would have been Georgia and not Miami facing Indiana. So the result, even last year, would have not been changed, but the opponent would have been changed. But there were been some years where the actual the number one, number two teams would have been the same. I think probably, but who's to say? So yeah, the CFP, if it didn't exist, you would have had, like, for example, even the first year, Ohio State would have not been a national title team. It would have been like Alabama versus Oregon, I believe, would have been your national title. So yeah, interesting what if there. A lot of butterfly effects too. We could do that in itself could be its own video series. Second one here. What if Dan Mullen didn't get fired from Florida? Very interesting. So of course, Dan Mullen was at Florida for a number of years, like 2018 to 2021. So pretty decent sample size, 4 years, I believe, close to 4 years. Did a lot of good stuff there at Florida. A lot of folks won't admit that, but multiple 10-win seasons for the first time, at least in a row, since since when Dan Mullen was in Gainesville as a OC under Meyer. For a long time, they had their first 11-win season plus since won West Champ in 2012. So, Dan did some really good stuff there at Florida. I think a lot of Florida fans now, after what you experienced with Billy Napier, kind of like, yeah, while things weren't going well with Dan, especially off the field in terms of recruiting, they were getting further and further distance from their main competitors like Georgia, even I think Florida State at the time, and even to a certain extent Miami, and of course LSU and other teams in the SEC. But Florida, under Dan Mullen, besides recruiting, weren't necessarily that bad. I mean, their offenses were good, better, obviously, than what you were getting under Billy Napier by far. Obviously, better than what you had under Jim McElwain and even Will Muschamp, even. But I mean, there was at least some stability. Yeah, you had a good enough offense. You had someone who was developing quarterbacks. I mean, what Dan Mullen did with, I forget who was it. Was it Anthony Richardson? I believe that he was there during Dan Mullen, and obviously the 1 year under Bill Napier. I mean, even Anthony Richardson, his time under Dan Mullen, way better than he was under Bill Napier. Just was properly misused, in my opinion, back then. So, yeah, I think if Dan Mullen if you didn't fire him, I think you would have had more consistency in terms of the offensive output. You've had better numbers and better quarterback play. Now, I will say, the overall records he would have had under Dan Mullen, if he was still the coach, especially now with the SEC expanding and NIL and things like that. I guess I can't guarantee it would have been like a whole lot better than what you had under Billy Napier, but again, offensive output definitely better. Quarterback play obviously better than what you had under Billy Napier. I mean, of course, Dan Mullen would have probably gotten a whole lot more out of guys like DJ Lagway and whoever. But yeah, I don't know if we've been that much better, again, because the whole recruiting thing was a mess and that needed to be addressed. And I believe defense too have fallen off a little bit. But I think Florida fans obviously would have had, or much preferred now, I mean, hindsight's 2020, they would have much rather had Dan Mullen still be the coach versus what they ended up having under, or what they eventually had under Billy Napier. I think a lot of folks would agree with that, especially my UF friends. I have a couple of them. And then lastly here, Florida State. What if they lost a single game in 2014? 2014 was a very weird year. I mean, it was the first year I moved to Florida. First year I became a Bucs fan. It was also the first year of the playoffs. Sort of that, I didn't mention this before, 2014 to me was sort of the last really, 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 really good year of college football, in my opinion. It was chaotic. You had the SEC being very chaotic with like the rise of Mississippi State and the rise of Ole Miss, and sort of the continued dominance under with Nick Saban. You had Auburn coming off the national title run, was still pretty good under Malzahn, at least that year. They had a decent offense. The last time they even had a decent offense, really, really good one, or at least close to elite one. You had the Pac-12, who was pretty good with Oregon. You had the Big Ten of Ohio State. And Michigan State was still pretty good, and Penn State was still, was it the first year under James Franklin, I believe? Yeah, the first year under James. He first got there. So, it just that year in general, I mean, it was the first year of the playoff. It was sort of that weird transition year of like us leaving the BCS era into the playoff era, sort of like a weird liminal period there. And I was very nostalgic too. I mean, I was in middle school when it happened. Can't believe now it's already been 12 years, a decade now. But in terms of Florida State that year, I remember in particular, I mean, there were so many games that year before, of course, they get to the playoff and they lose to Oregon in emphatic fashion, just a microcosm of how rotten things were starting to get there in Tallahassee, which were made even more evident in the latter years of the Jimbo Fisher year before he went to Texas A&M. I mean, that team had so many close games. The first game of the year, the game against Oklahoma State in Dallas. People forget that. That was a close game. Game against Clemson, overtime. NC State, you were down 24-7 somehow. You came back and won. Ditto with Louisville. Miami was a close game. You were struggling, I believe, against Boston College. You struggled against Florida. You struggled against Georgia Tech. All these games, you were even to a certain extent. They even struggled against Syracuse a little bit too. So all these games that year in 2014, you have Florida State just like somehow, some way, like sciencing their way out of these, out of these games and winning these games. And credit where credit is due. They had, guys like Jameis Winston and Carlos Williams, a very veteran team, who were able to at least get these, sort of get Florida State through these games. But unfortunately, once they made it to the playoff, they met their match. But the what if here is what they lost. Pick any of these games. Let's say they lost to NC State. Right after that dramatic Clemson game with, Sean McGuire at quarterback, and Jameis comes back after the suspension. That was probably the game that year that Florida State was looking back at it. If I was doing my shit back then, I would have definitely picked Florida State to lose that game. Just coming off the emotional high of the Clemson game, you peak there and you have to come down, and you're playing NC State. Who was this? Coach Jacoby Brissett. They're 4-0. Okay, sure. Like, cool for NC State being 4-0. We should take care of them. Especially after what happened the previous year. They beat them by 63. It was like 63-21 or something like that. And then they get down 24-7. Normally, teams don't usually win those games, but with this Florida State team, they sort of always found the way to science their way out of it. And so, yeah, let's just say they lose the NC State game. And everything else stays the same. They still beat Boston College. They still beat Florida. They still beat Georgia Tech. And they still win the ACC. I'll be honest with you, based on how wobbly they were already and how already in actual history, they were teetering, being like the first team, ironically, until Florida State. In the final year of the college football playoff, be left out as the undefeated team. If they lost one game, just one game in 2014, I think Florida State would have been out. And I think you would have had either Baylor or TCU just replaced them. If everything else stays the same, I think you would have had Florida State and the ACC be left out, and you would have had TCU/Baylor be in over them. And then the question is, who ends up winning the national title? Is it, this TCU under Trevon Boykin, did they actually make a run and actually beat Oregon and, go on to play Ohio State and they beat them somehow? I don't know. I mean, you can use game theory and all that to, I guess, do a simulation on that. But yeah, if Florida State lost, they would have been out the playoff. That's for sure. Again, if I had to choose, probably would have been that NC State game after the Clemson game. I mean, you could have easily picked other games like the Boston College game against Louisville on that Thursday night. But to me, probably would have, if they would have lost one game, looking back at it, like if we were to, go back in time leading up to that NC State game, I would have said, yeah, they're going to lose that NC State game. Like, that is the ultimate trap game. They've lost here before. It's the sort of, as Bud calls it. I believe it's the Carter Finley curse. It just seems to me that would have been, looking back at it, if we had the show back then. I was like, 12 years old back then, but yeah, I would have easily picked Florida State to lose that NC State game, and I think they probably would have if you were to simulate this more often than not. Then they will have lost that game. So interesting what if there. And that's it for the show. 40 minutes there. Okay, so somewhat medium-sized show. We'll be back tomorrow, not on YouTube, but for the extra pod. Answer some questions again. Marvel is having their CinemaCon presentation tonight there under Disney. It'll be starting in about on the East Coast in a couple of hours, I believe. So how about that? We'll obviously do react to that tomorrow. I'll give you guys my thoughts on it on the extra pod. I'm sure someone will submit a question. But yeah, so we'll have that tomorrow, probably around the afternoon. Can't do it in the morning because we'll have a couple of things going on. But for sure in the afternoon around this time, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, we'll be ready to go. So until next week, next Tuesday again. Going forward for now, we should have a normal week, I think. Until the week after Memorial Day, we should be fine. Now that's the next time we'll have a disruption. I have to go on vacation. So up until then, for the next 5 weeks or so, we should be back to normal. But until then, we won't be back to normal. But luckily, besides that, and potentially 4th of July, we should be okay. So no more disruptions, no more us having to do skip days. I think we should be back to normal finally. Again, apologies for that, but yeah, our apartment every single year does, especially in the spring, these checks, and they do the inspections, and of course they do the emergency alert testing and whatnot. It's been pretty hectic. So finally, we're done with that. So we're back, I guess. We're back for now. Then we'll be taking off a little bit in May. So again, until next Tuesday, again, we'll have an extra pod tomorrow on Spotify only. Make sure you're subscribed over there on the podcast feed. Until then, take care. We'll see you guys